Emotions are often described as the very essence of the human experience, shaping the way we navigate life, relationships, and decision-making. Yet, despite their intensity and importance, they do not define who we are. This assertion may seem counterintuitive in a culture that frequently tells us to follow our hearts or that identifies people by their passions, anger, or grief. However, science, philosophy, and psychology reveal a deeper truth. While emotions are a part of the human experience, they do not constitute our entire identity. The first step in understanding how emotions do not define us is to recognize what emotions are and how they operate. Emotions are complex, often fleeting, physiological and psychological reactions to internal and external events. They are evolutionary adaptations designed to help us survive and thrive. For example, fear can heighten our alertness and prepare us to escape danger, while joy fosters social bonds and encourages cooperation. Emotions, in essence, serve as tools for interaction with the environment, but they do not encapsulate our complete sense of self. The human brain is responsible for generating emotions, and neuroscientific research has illuminated how this process occurs. The amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure deep in the brain, plays a central role in processing emotional stimuli, particularly fear and pleasure. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for rational thought and decision-making, helps modulate these emotional responses. Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux's research highlights that while the amygdala may trigger an immediate emotional reaction, the prefrontal cortex can intervene to reassess the situation, potentially altering or calming the initial emotional response. What does this mean for identity? It demonstrates that emotions are not immutable aspects of who we are. They are temporary, malleable reactions that can be modulated, suppressed, or reframed. This malleability suggests that emotions cannot fully define us, because they are subject to change, often influenced by context, cognition, and choice. We have the ability to reinterpret our emotions, detach from them, or choose different responses, indicating a separation between the self and the transient emotional state. Psychologists and cognitive scientists have long studied the dynamic between emotion and identity. The cognitive behavioral model, for example, posits that emotions are closely tied to thoughts and interpretations. When an event occurs, our brain rapidly interprets it, which then triggers an emotional reaction. This is why two people can respond to the same event with entirely different emotions. Their interpretations differ. Importantly, since interpretations and beliefs can change, so can the associated emotions. If emotions were fundamental to our identity, they would be fixed and unchangeable, but they are not. Consider the example of someone who experiences anger during a disagreement. The anger may feel all-consuming at that moment, perhaps even feeling like an inseparable part of who they are. Yet, as time passes, the anger dissipates. Reflection, conversation, or context can shift the emotional response entirely. The person may realize that the anger was a reaction to misunderstanding or stress. In such cases, the anger was not an expression of their core identity, but a transient state influenced by external conditions. This realization helps us see that while emotions are part of our experience, they are not definitive markers of who we are. In exploring the fluidity of emotions, mindfulness practices offer valuable insights. Mindfulness, rooted in ancient Buddhist traditions and supported by contemporary psychology, emphasizes observing emotions without attaching to them. Practitioners learn to acknowledge emotions as passing phenomena, akin to clouds drifting through the sky. You are the sky, vast and unchanging, while emotions are the clouds, impermanent, shifting, and often beyond your control. By cultivating a detached awareness, people learn that they are not their emotions. They are the observer, the awareness beneath the emotional experience. This idea aligns with the work of Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn, the founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR. He advocates for the practice of observing thoughts and emotions as temporary states rather than fixed identities. His research shows that mindfulness can reduce the impact of negative emotions like anxiety and anger by fostering a sense of separation from these feelings. This reinforces the concept that we are not defined by our emotional reactions, but by a deeper, more enduring self that can observe and engage with these emotions. The philosophical perspective further underscores this distinction. Existentialist thinkers, such as Jean-Paul Sartre, argue that humans are fundamentally free to define themselves through their actions and choices, rather than being determined by emotions or circumstances. Sartre's notion of bad faith describes the act of allowing external factors, including emotions, to dictate one's identity. In contrast, authentic living involves acknowledging the freedom to choose one's responses, irrespective of fleeting emotional states. In this framework, emotions are seen as inputs or data points that inform, but do not define, our existence. Moreover, the Stoic philosophers, such as Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, taught that while we cannot always control what emotions arise, we can control how we respond to them. According to Stoicism, our true power lies in our capacity to choose our attitude toward external events and internal emotions. This perspective empowers individuals to recognize that while emotions are part of life, they do not have the power to dictate who we are unless we allow them to. Modern psychology also explores the phenomenon of emotional resilience, which further illustrates how emotions do not define identity. Resilience refers to the ability to adapt and recover from emotional challenges, such as stress, trauma, or grief. Research by psychologists like Dr. Martin Seligman has shown that resilient individuals possess a flexible mindset and an ability to separate their self-worth from emotional turmoil. They understand that experiencing negative emotions does not mean they are broken or defined by those feelings. Instead, they view emotions as temporary challenges to navigate, reinforcing the idea that emotions are part of the journey but not the destination of the self. Another compelling concept is the theory of emotional granularity introduced by psychologist Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. Her research challenges the traditional view of emotions as fixed, universal categories. Instead, she argues that emotions are constructed experiences shaped by culture, language, and individual history. For instance, one person might label a physical sensation as nervousness, while another might interpret it as excitement. This ability to differentiate and reinterpret emotions reveals that they are not intrinsic, unchangeable aspects of our identity, but flexible interpretations of our experiences. This insight has profound implications for self-understanding. If emotions are constructed and can be reframed, they do not represent an unalterable aspect of who we are. We are not an anxious person or an angry person by nature. We are individuals who sometimes experience anxiety or anger. This distinction liberates us from the trap of self-limiting labels and allows for growth, change, and the recognition of a more fluid identity. Furthermore, the human experience is vast, encompassing values, goals, memories, and relationships that extend beyond momentary emotions. Our identity is composed of enduring aspects, such as our principles, aspirations, and life narratives. Emotions may influence these aspects, but they do not define them. A person dedicated to kindness, for example, may experience frustration or irritation, but these fleeting emotions do not negate their commitment to kindness. The core identity remains intact, separate from transient emotional states. In addition, emotions often arise in response to external circumstances, which means they reflect situational contexts rather than inherent qualities of the self. For example, feeling grief after a loss is a natural response to a specific event. The grief may be intense and prolonged, but it does not define the person experiencing it. They are still the same individual with the same values, skills, and potential for joy. The grief is part of their experience, but not the entirety of their identity. Ultimately, recognizing that emotions do not define us fosters a healthier relationship with our emotional lives. It allows us to experience emotions fully without being overwhelmed by them or mistaking them for fixed aspects of ourselves. This perspective encourages emotional intelligence, the ability to understand, express, and manage emotions effectively. It also promotes self-compassion, as we realize that experiencing difficult emotions does not mean we are flawed or unworthy. In conclusion, while emotions are a fundamental part of the human experience, they do not define who we are. They are transient, malleable, and context-dependent. Science, psychology, mindfulness, and philosophy all support the idea that our identity transcends our emotional states. By embracing this understanding, we can navigate emotions with greater freedom, resilience, and authenticity, knowing that beneath the ever-changing waves of emotion lies a deeper, more constant self.